see Tim Spencer. So if I can, Tim, can we just start with you and then move around the room, starting to your left, and everybody can introduce themselves.
Tim Spencer, I'm city attorney from the city of Roanoke.
James Schleisman, counsel to the Opioid Abatement Authority.
Karen Moisan, I'm the newest admin for the Opioid Abatement Authority. So, meet you guys.
Hello, I'm a Fulbright scholar and an intern at the Virginia Opioid Abatement Authority. Hello. I'm sorry, I didn't say my name. Hello.
Hello from Lebanon.
Charlie Lincecum, Director of Operations for the Opioid Abatement.
Jennifer Faison, Virginia Association of Community Services Boards. I am in my current capacity. I am just running the Zoom. You can pretend I don't exist.
Sharon Buckman, I'm Director of Clinical Services at Piedmont Community Services.
I'm Mike Tillum. I'm the founder, executive director of the Journey House Foundation, with recovery community organization. We have 120 beds, 15 recovery houses, 2 recovery centers right in this area.
My name is Jimmy Thompson, and I'm an addiction treatment physician, president of the Virginia chapter of ASAM, and member of the board.
In the gallery, Joel Morgan, Executive Director of Virginia Recovery Pool.
Michelle Sutherland on behalf of Dr. Lees.
Mark Hickman with VCU Health.
Right, that's it for the room today.
Great, thank you. And so, Dr. Melton, would you mind introducing yourself to the folks in attendance?
Hi, everyone. I'm Sarah Melton. I'm professor of pharmacy practice at the Gatton College of Pharmacy and on the Opioid Abatement Authority, serve as vice chair.
And Adam?
Hi, Adam Rosatelli, Finance Director for the Opioid Abatement Authority.
And last and maybe least, Tony McDowell. I'm the Executive Director. I appreciate everybody's willingness to meet in this hybrid virtual / in-person method. It allows us to meet the letter of the state law about public meetings. We have a quorum present with 4 members of the committee physically present in the room, and with Dr. Melton joining us online. So the only folks that we don't have in attendance will be Senator Pillion. He may or may not be popping in during the meeting virtually, and Mr. Holland, Jim Holland, who's a member of the Board of Supervisors in Chesterfield, and Chesterfield is conducting a board meeting as we speak, so he's not able to join us. So with that as an introduction, I believe we've established a quorum. Everybody's been introduced. The first item of business is possible election of a committee chair, and this really is at the discretion of the members of the committee who are present. It would be helpful for us to have a chair established at this meeting, if we can do that, in order to have an individual who can be the main point of contact with the staff as we plan future meetings, and then to preside over future meetings. And so obviously we have 2 folks that are not present today, and so that would make it impossible for them to accept the nomination. But with the indulgence of the committee, I would open it up right now for any nominations for anyone who's willing to serve in the capacity of the chair of the committee.
If I could, if she's willing to serve, I'd like to nominate Dr. Sarah Melton as chair. Once again.
And third before you get away.
You should have been here live.
Can't hear you.
Fault.
Okay, I'm happy to serve. If that's the will of the authority, I'm happy to do that.
Sounds good to me.
All right, thank you. Are there any other nominations? That being the case, we have 1 nomination, which is for Dr. Melton to serve as the chair. Is there a pleasure of the group to offer a motion to adopt a plan for Sarah to become the chair?
I'll make a motion for you, Tony. I'm not sure how to verbalize that, but I make a motion to plan for elect Sarah to become the chair of the grants committee. Sarah Melton.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a nomination and a motion and a second. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Okay, Dr. Milton, thank you for agreeing and congratulations on your appointment as the chair.
And Tony, should we have a vice chair in case Dr. Melton can't be present?
Absolutely can do that if the group is willing to make another nomination for an individual to serve as a vice chair.
Being the lawyer and the local big mouth, I nominate Jimmy Thompson as vice chair.
Second that. We can do that. Like you have enough.
Are there any other nominations for vice chair? If not, is there a motion on the floor to nominate and to elect Dr. Thompson as a vice chair?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, congratulations, Dr. Thompson. You've been elected as the vice chair.
Thank you. Thanks,
But
everybody.
for both of you, I think Dr. Milton had a pretty heavy lift in her first committee because there was no staff to help her initially. And so the staff will do everything we can to make this process as efficient and as painless for you guys as possible. So thank you again for stepping up to take those positions. I'm going to turn my video off just to save bandwidth. My wife is working the same space where I'm working, and we're both virtual, and so just saves a little bit of bandwidth. The next item on the agenda is a presentation that is going to be provided both by myself and by Charlie Linicum, and I've got the first few slides on that. And so as Jennifer pulls that up onto the screen, we will be ready to roll. Okay, so welcome to the first meeting of the Virginia Opioid Abatement Authority's Grants Committee, and we can move to the second slide. So I'm going to lay out some proposed goals and objectives for the committee as an effort to create a foundation and lay a path forward. And so what we would like to recommend is as goals and objectives for this committee is as follows. First of all, is to review and approve the overall process by which we provide grants. And I'm using the term grant in a sort of a broad context because these are different types of financial instruments. We could be funding contracts, we could be funding proposals with cities and counties, we could be entering into different types of agreements to provide different types of financial assistance, loans, other distributions. But I think it's for the purpose of this conversation, we're referring to all of that as, which is the term grants. So that's the first goal, is to approve the overall process. The second goal is to understand that staff is going to be seeking guidance from the committee with various decision points, both today and in future meetings. And some examples of those types of guidance or decision points that we'll be seeking guidance from the committee, just as examples, will include, what are the specific additional criteria that proposals have to meet beyond what's listed in the statute. We may need some help from the committee, we do need help from the committee in brainstorming what are likely to be projects and proposals that come forward that are sort of in a gray area as to whether or not they meet the intent of the settlement and whether or not they meet the statute. And we can probably provide you some examples of some that we've already brainstormed, but we think it would be appropriate and efficient use of everyone's time if we could brainstorm some of the likely gray area projects now, so that when we provide training and information to localities in January, that we can address those head on. And so that we'll have a consistent response for those. We're going to need some guidance from the committee on what are the appropriate timeframes that localities should be allowed in order to perform the scope of the proposed work, especially since we're all sort of new in this effort. I think it's likely that we're gonna have localities that turn in proposals that become funded, but then it takes a year or two or longer to actually implement those proposals because of a variety of factors. And so we'll have to think about what's the allowable time frame for the work to be completed. And then the fourth example would be, to give us feedback on policies on how the OAA should respond if a recipient needs to make a change to a project in the middle of the project, if they need to move funds from one portion of the project that had been approved and to reinvest them into maybe a different part of that project, or maybe to completely change their direction altogether in the middle of a grant cycle. And so those are just examples of some of the types of things that we're going to ask for this committee to provide some feedback to us. And we will bring those questions to you for feedback. Okay, let me go to the next slide. A third goal and objective would be to understand that the staff is going to come to the committee and ask for the committee to consider a policy whereby we have various levels of award approval and decision making. And so are there certain types of awards that can be made that can be approved by the staff? And an example of this is in the case of the funds that are already reserved for each city and each county. They simply need to show to us that the program that they want to implement meets the statutory requirements. Are there some of those that will meet it? If we can check certain boxes off of a checklist, can the staff simply bundle those into a group that can be put on a list of approved projects? And then at the next level, are there certain levels of awards that would be approved by this committee? And finally, are there certain awards that would need the vote of the full board? A fourth goal and objective is for the committee to provide assistance to the staff as subject matter experts as we go through the review of the proposals. We may need to phone a friend, so to speak. If there's a question about an element, whether it's if it's a treatment issue, then perhaps we could speak with our experts on the board, including Dr. Melton and Dr. Thompson, to gain some insight about that proposed treatment. If there's a question about how a city is structuring a deal legally, perhaps we could consult with Mr. Spencer and so forth, as opposed to having full meetings that we may need to reach out to you individually and get your feedback on specific pieces and parts of different proposals. And the fifth goal and objective is for members of this committee to feel comfortable acting as an ambassador of the authority, and specifically as an ambassador about what the grants committee does when going out and interacting with various stakeholders and people in the community. Okay, just a quick overview of sort of the timeline that we're looking at. The real challenge is the next 2 months, because we have a firm date of January 19th that we are going to open up the application period for cities and counties. And that means that we have to find definitive answers to a number of these questions before then. We need to be able to provide all of the rules, all the terms and conditions, all the details on January 19th. And so from now until January 19th, we're going to be developing policies. We're going to be putting the forms together. We're going to be constructing the terms and conditions, or the fine print, if you will. We're going to be developing the instructions for the applicants and FAQs and training support documents for cities and counties. We are proposing another meeting. The next full meeting of this committee will be on January 6th. We'll be able to do that entirely virtually. The law says that we can't meet virtually back to back. So we can do every other as long as we don't exceed a certain number of virtual meetings. And so the next meeting on January 6th will be virtual. And our expectation is to bring you basically a final draft of much of the policy and the guidance document, so that the committee can take a final vote to approve all of that on January 6th. That gives us then just shy of 2 weeks to package everything up and prepare it for presentation to our live audience on January 19th. So January 19th is, again, it's an announcement, it's an opening, it's a workshop where Charlie and the team are going to review with the attendees how they can apply for these grants and what's required. What are the requirements of the programs? What's the statutory requirements? What's required in the settlement agreements and so forth. The following morning on January 20th, we are going to be doing a best practices workshop to provide cities and counties with examples of the types of programs that have been implemented in other areas, other communities with success, to try to give them some ideas of things to work on. After that point, we need to have monthly meetings of the grants committee in late January, in February, March, April, and May. And in each of those meetings, we'll be bringing to you lists of projects that are proposed for award, or that may be considered for the committee to offer an award, or where the committee may be creating its own set of recommendations to go to the full board. And so this is sort of a rolling process of approving grant applications, if you will, on a monthly basis. And then we plan to stop accepting applications on May 5th. And that's intended to give us enough time to deal with everything that's in the pipeline and make decisions and awards by the end of the fiscal year. The hope is that as we go into the full calendar year 2023, we would like to open this process earlier, probably open the application process in the October, November timeframe to give localities more time to answer questions, to respond to information that we may, where we may need additional information from them, give them time to attend meetings of the authority to respond to any questions or to appeal a decision. That would also be consistent with the timeframe that most cities and counties use for their own internal budget process. So if we can open the application period up in November, wrap it up in April or May, I think that is sort of what we're leaning towards proposed schedule going forward. Okay. And then my final slide is just a reminder that we do have a series of listening sessions coming up. We're going to try to make the best use of your time as committee members by bundling, when we have to have in-person meetings, to bundle those with listening sessions, so that you can attend both the listening session and the grants committee meeting. In a couple of cases, we're bundling full board meetings, and in a couple other cases, we're bundling them with grant committee meetings. We are looking for a field trip in the Portsmouth area that would not be part of a listening session, but would like for the grants committee to have the chance to tour a treatment/recovery program in a sort of more urban area, in order to make sure that the committee is getting visibility on some of the unique challenges that exist in the more urban parts of the community, and for areas that are more traditionally disadvantaged communities. And so Adam is working on putting that together, and that'll probably happen in February. So that's not on the calendar, but we'll be adding that to your agenda as well. So I'm going to pause here and ask if any members of the committee have any questions for me before I turn over the next piece of the presentation to Charlie.
Tony, just one thing, if you could afterwards send everyone a copy of this presentation with the updated calendar.
Yes, sir. Absolutely. We'll do that.
Thank you.
Okay. Madam Chairperson, with your indulgence, I'll turn it over to Charlie to continue on.
Sounds great. Thank you.
Right. Thanks, Tony. So I'm going to kind of just give an overview of kind of the different areas of buckets and kind of where we're thinking that things are going to go, what we're designing for your review in January. So obviously everything, is going to be driven on our gold standard, which is based on the statutory requirements you're all familiar with. 100% abatement, evidence-based and informed, non-supplanting, can't replace, your local, your state funds or your local funds you've already invested. No indirect costs being, scraping a little bit of stuff off the top for administrative overhead that may be shared amongst 2, 3, 4, or 5 other programs. Obviously, there has to be reporting requirements, not only financial, but also programmatic, or KPI type things. And then obviously agreements to all of the terms and conditions that work along with that. Next slide. There we are. All right, so we'll start with our process for our cities and counties, their entitlement money. So is the tree that you're all familiar with, this is the 15% of OAA's 55% that goes directly to the cities and counties through the OAA. So we're hoping with everything, the committee's going to oversee the process, the staff, we're going to execute all the work, all the nitty gritty details to be able to bring you all items for decisions. Additionally, the committee is going to kind of ensure that the process is meeting the needs of the localities, so the things you hear from being out, in the Commonwealth that can be brought to us to help make adjustments, and obviously the OAA's mission. Our plan is we would obviously review the applications and kind of mirroring part of what Tony was talking about. We would then kind of categorize them to be for decision making. The next slide. Continuing the city county process, we would kind of have a group of ones that would be available for staff approval. Part of what we do is obviously we need to develop a policy for you all to approve, where this is kind of the things that Tony was talking about, where things that already exist in other areas, things that a locality may already be doing that that they just want to expand upon, add more staff members, add more resources to. These are things that we kind of want to get into the pipeline as quickly as possible and not stand in the way of something that already exists. And then there, other things that might need to have a committee approval or committee review for board approval. So then obviously we need to develop what would constitute denying someone these funds. Initially, we obviously don't want to do that. We hope to be able to kind of request additional information, work with the applicants and be like, well, you see if they can modify and kind of update their submission to make sure that it's meeting the standards that we need to. Though I think we know that some people may have decided that they have determined that this meets, an abatement definition, even though we may not make the agreement. So then if we do get to that point where, then we would present kind of to the committee, here's what they're saying, here's what we're saying, for you all to be able to make a decision. If you think that maybe it could be approved, or if you're feeling the denial as well, then that's something we could take to the full board, and allow the locality to kind of present its case to the full board to make a decision of, will we go ahead and allow an approval, or maybe that is something that pushes a stronger push for an amendment, or would it be an outright denial and maybe they need to start over. So we want to be in the place of making sure that if we ever are into that position, that we're fully open and transparent about any type of denial process. So, and then the application period for this opens January 19th, 2023. Go back for a second. Any questions on the cities, counties piece before I move to the next point?
On the denial process, will we be giving the folks that are asking for these grants, will we be giving them examples of what we would deny to keep them from, to give them an outline of what we would accept so they don't?
Part of what we're thinking about in our kind of our terms and conditions and guidance documents is things like when we talk about indirect cost, we'll have an example of, if I hire you to run an opioid use disorder treatment program for my locality, and that's what you're doing 100% of that time, that's direct costs, that's eligible. But if I'm going to take 10% for my time overseeing you doing that, that's indirect cost, that's not. So we're going to put examples like that in, and that's also part of the gray area brainstorming that we're talking about, to think about things that might constitute things that maybe have a piece of opioid or maybe are look like opioid but are not, and how do we want to handle it? Yes, sir.
And Charlie, are we also going to do, thinking the other way of what Mike had said, almost pre-approved types of programs? Hey, if you're doing this,
Yes.
it complies.
Part of what Hala is doing for us here is our intern, is she's actually working with Jennifer and the CSBs to kind of get a toolkit together of like programs that already exist in other localities that are kind of, would basically be ready to go for a locality that doesn't have anything to be able to implement, and would kind of be like, we'd like to get those kind of in the express lane to get approved, because if it's already got a structure, it's already got performance measures, and we can use those performance measures across the Commonwealth and aggregate them and that kind of thing. That, yeah, we want to try. Those are the kind of things we're thinking about. That would be like a staff approval, and then we would be able to bring to you and say, the staff has approved these kind of in a block, these types of, these types of applications.
Thank you.
May I ask, will we be considering at all programs that to help address barriers that people experience trying to get services like transportation or homelessness? Is there any way that we can consider that?
I think consideration, certainly. I think it's how do we tie it to, how do we brightly show that it is abatement? And it could be something that it's like, is in a certain community is homelessness, say 50% of the homelessness in say Wise County is because of opioid use disorder. And you say, all right, so you have $100,000 program, we can fund $50,000. As an example of kind of things we're kicking around to make sure we're staying towards that kind of 100% abatement. But certainly we want to consider anything that that a locality wants to do, and just trying to figure out how do we work that in to fit the definition. Any other thoughts on that, Tony?
Sorry, it takes me a second to find the mute button. I think that any programs that come forward from a locality that are specifically designed to reduce barriers for people to get treatment would absolutely qualify. And, there's a pretty broad umbrella of programs that will meet the definition of abatement. And, what the staff has to think about, we have to think about sort of the worst case scenarios, but I do anticipate that many of the applications that come in will be shovel-ready projects that clearly meet the intent of the settlement and the statute. And I think we'll be able to, as Charlie said, put a lot of those in the fast lane. And so to your question, Ms. Buckman, if there's a program that talks about getting people who don't have transportation to treatment that they need, then absolutely that would qualify.
Thank you.
Any other questions on the city-county process?
Again, just
Yeah.
one other question, private service providers. And tying those private service providers to certain localities that might not be aware of what is available. What, if any, role will we have in tying those together to help a locality with their proposal?
Well, part of it will be the toolkit that we're developing. We are working with, the DBHDS, Tony, I just met today with, they have regional kind of representatives that work directly with the CSBs. And we kind of talked to them about what we're doing and trying to have their more out and meeting with the CSBs more often, trying to kind of let them take our things forward. And we're trying to put as many people out to understand that if there is something, if they have a question or interested in using these funds, they can contact us and we can figure out who else to put them in contact with. Is it the locality? Is there, as we receive, the next thing I'll talk about is regional things. And, it may be that we've got 3 small applications from 3 areas that are close together. Should that maybe become a regional effort that can, so we kind of want to be a big tent to bring people together in as many ways as we can possibly. And if we can't do it, we're trying to partner with other people to have more of a statewide reach that can direct people to us. So we can be those relationship builders or conveners if need be. So we're working through that as many ways as we possibly can.
Thank you.
Mr. Spencer, if I can jump in for a second, this is Tony. We've gotten a lot of, there's clearly an appetite across Virginia for the Opioid Abatement Authority to be a matchmaker between localities and organizations that can provide services. That's going to be, it's going to take us time to get there because that's a very labor intensive type of function for us to provide. It's basically becoming a facilitator. I do believe that that's a huge opportunity for the authority to not just distribute funds, but to really be an authority that entities look to make this whole concept work. And it's one thing to have the money, it's another thing to put the money to the best use. And I think that there's clearly an appetite for someone to help lead in that space. And ultimately, it's a decision of the board how much you want to get involved in that. We're going to bring you some specific thoughts in the budget about how we can push that a little bit more aggressively. But it's definitely an area where there's a need and an appetite for assistance.
Got something, Jim?
I've got a question in a way, it's for you, Tony. Going back to your initial presentation, but it sort of occurs to me, and I hope I can make this question make sense. But given that our funds are limited, and we're talking about fast track projects, shovel-ready projects, is there something in the way that we talked about the cycle of taking applications and approving applications that will allow the committee to sort of compare the relative value of different proposals? In other words, if we green light and fast track certain kinds of things, would it, if we're not careful, put us in a position where later in the cycle we may not be able to approve something that we would have approved because of lack of allotted funding? Is there a way for us to try to make sure we are getting the best relative value out of a cycle of proposals? Or is it sort of, is it more just approve as we go until the money's gone?
So let me try to answer the question this way, and then maybe Charlie can provide more clarity. It depends which category of awards we're talking about. You know, each city and each county has a specific amount that they are entitled to under the MOU and under the statute. And all they have to demonstrate is that they're going to spend the funding in a manner that's consistent with the statute. And at that level, at this level of decision making, when it comes to what we call the entitlement funds, the only decision that the committee's making, that the staff is making, is does the request qualify or does it not qualify? And if it qualifies, then we have to fund it. The MOU clearly gives the cities and counties the opportunity to decide how they want to spend these funds as long as it's directed towards abatement. Now, what Charlie's getting ready to tell you about are the regional projects and the funds for state agencies. Those are going to be competitive and they have to add up to a certain number. And so those are the projects where the committee will have to do exactly what you're suggesting, Dr. Thompson. They're going to have to lay them all out on the table and figure out which ones should be funded. What's the priority for different types of projects? Not only do we have to balance it out financially to come to a specific number, but we also have to balance it geographically. And so that we're not funding only projects in Northern Virginia or only projects, in one particular area. And so that's going to be a real balancing act. And I think that's what Charlie's getting ready to present to you next.
That makes sense. Thank you. That makes sense. Yeah.
Next slide. So, process for regional partnerships. Thanks for the segue. So as Tony mentioned, so these are more competitive. There is no entitlement funds to the regions. There's no there's only the bucket. that, of the OAA's funds that go there. So, and as Tony's also mentioned, it must be balanced. So all the wards combined should be 35% of OAA's 55% of the total settlement. And it needs to be balanced, geographically. I think we all know we could easily spend all the money in Southwest Virginia and bring good balance for the state, but that's not necessarily fair across the board. So that'll be one of the challenges that we're looking at, and whatnot. So, and I think to your point, this will be where we'll be looking for highest and best use, I believe. So again, from a process standpoint, I think the staff would review applications and again, not deny any. We would be bringing these to the committee, kind of to review probably with some recommendations, and probably categorization of kind of some of across like our major categories. And so the committee would have the action or the option to request additional information or amendments. Clearly, the staff up front will do some of that if there's things that don't seem clear. Recommend approval, potentially deferral or denial, with deferral being something that maybe we need more information on, or maybe we need the results of a study, or a pilot program to give us some more evidence base to be able to implement something. And it's like, we like the idea, but we're not sure it meets the qualifications right now and might need to defer action on it. And then for recommendations to the board for final vote. So, and additionally, we have decided to go ahead and open this application period at the same time, because we have a feeling there are going to potentially be some localities that's where they want to send their money, is more to the regional projects, especially if they want everything to kind of be working through a CSB. And we thought better to kind of get those started at the same time. So also we can see if there's any overlap of anything between the types of proposals that we receive. Any questions on the regional partnerships? Okay. State agencies. So there is no statutory entitlement amount for any specific state agency. And we think this is a real opportunity for the OAA to kind of drive the agencies towards collaboration. And we're kind of hoping to use like a request for proposal process to, again, look for highest and best use, and look for, look for gaps statewide, or in regional areas where state agencies can kind of help drive solutions for that. But we also may need to consider a process for unsolicited proposals from state agencies as well. And we would keep the committee engaged on each step of this process. This is a little bit like further down the line than January 19th. There's some administrative timing things we are working on figuring out with the different ways that financing is done in appropriations and things within state government, to kind of get a good timeline around that. So, any questions on state agency process?
Charlie, can I jump in?
Sure.
Just an example of the way we think this could work. I'll give you one example. There's a concern that we have local elected officials at the city and county level who don't have any background in addiction medicine. And so an idea came forward from the Virginia Institute of Government, and not sure if they qualify as a state agency or not. James is working on that for us. But if they're a state agency, then we could work with them and provide them funding to create a training program for all newly elected city and county officials. As part of the training that they already provide to those officials, they could include a component on substance use disorders and opioid addiction, so that all newly elected local elected leaders would receive that training, and that would qualify under the statute as an education and awareness project. And it would be clearly something that would be nice to do statewide, as opposed to trying to think of something that one city or one county could fund on its own. So I just offer that as an example. We'll need to figure out what are the priorities of statewide gaps that we're trying to fill, and then which agencies can we partner with to fill those gaps. And there's a lot of ideas out there.
and on so discretionary funds. This is our last bucket. So should the board elect to provide additional awards to any applicants beyond their statutory minimums, this is the bucket that would come from. This is also obviously the bucket that funds the administrative operations of the OAA. But it's kind of it's just kind of the areas where maybe we can be a little more creative. Potentially, you know, things like studies and consultants, pilot projects, donations to projects or operations. You know, kind of any other examples, we'll be looking for input from the committee for recommendations of how we might be able to utilize these funds. And I think, Tony, if I'm right, the 25% incentive that we're giving to the localities also comes out of this bucket of funding, right?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
Any questions on discretionary funds at this point? All right. So, action items and decision points. And feel free to jump in with any questions as I run through these. So, we're looking to see, is there a consensus among the committee today that the staff should define the levels of decision-making and awards to bring to the committee to vote on January 6th. Tony, do you want to go through each of these individually or talk about all of them and then go back for questions and actions?
Well, this is the part of the meeting where we're just looking for feedback from the committee members. These don't need to be motions and votes, that sort of thing, but we're looking for direction. We want to make sure that we're doing what the committee desires. And so these are some of the questions that we have for you to consider. And I think it might make sense to kind of go through them one at a time, but if the group would rather lay it all out up front, that's fine as well. I'd leave it to the chair.
I'm fine with us going ahead and discussing each as we go through, just so that we can kind of get a comprehensive overview as we go through.
Sounds great. So, then back to the first item then. Would there be a consensus among the members today for the staff to define the levels of decision-making for the applications and awards to be able to bring to the committee to vote on in January 6th? Or are there questions still that you still have about the processes we've laid out as they are currently?
I thought it was very clear, the way you laid it out. I would be fine. As long as everyone else agrees, I think you've defined what our issues are. And then I think just going ahead and looking at the levels of that decision-making would be fine. I'm fine with you guys doing that. What does everybody else think?
If we're going to hit the 19th, we have to be able to be ready to at least consider and provide input on the 6th. I would only ask staff if they get a draft prepared as early as possible, send it out to the committee to be able to review and provide comments prior to the meeting on the 6th, so that that meeting can be even more useful.
Absolutely. I think that's in our plans. We want you all to be able to read through and digest what we put together and not have to read it cold on the 6th.
Hey, Tim, the flip side of that is we might send you, normally, you know, what we like to do when we give information to the board is we're giving it to you in a really final, clear, cleaned up, professional looking version. And in this case, we might share some rough draft materials with you, if that's okay.
That makes all the sense in the world.
Okay. All right. Seems to be a consensus. All right, we'll move to the next item. Is there a consensus that we should develop some type of narrowly defined process whereby state agencies may submit unsolicited proposals? This goes back to we plan to put out a kind of a request for proposals that identifies gaps that for state agencies, that identifies gaps that we're looking to kind of think to be closed with OAA items, with OAA funds. But there may be state agencies who've already thought they have ideas of what they want to do, and we would think to set up a process to guide them if they want to go ahead and get ahead of our process and submit something to us.
Does anybody have any examples of what that would look like, so that when what a state would ask for, just so.
This is if I may, Mike, I caught your question, but this is a big decision. Because one of the concerns that we've had is that, I mean, there's a lot of state agencies. And one of the concerns we've had is that a state agency could submit a decision package to the governor's office or to the General Assembly, and the response, and we've already seen some of this, the response back to that agency might be, why don't you go ask the Opioid Abatement Authority first and see if they'll give you the money? And I think we just have to be eyes wide open of the fact that we're limited on, this is the amount of money that we can provide to state agencies is 15% of our fund, which means it's 15% of 55% of the total awards to Virginia. For context, this is a big year for us, and that's $9 million for state agency projects. And so we could very easily be inundated with requests for funding from state agencies. And I think the reason why that this says, if we're going to allow unsolicited proposals from state agencies, that the process needs to be pretty narrowly defined. Otherwise, we could be practically overwhelmed with requests, and we're trying to create a process where we can bring recommendations to the board. And I'd hate to have 100 projects that we have to cull through from state agencies when we can only fund 1 or 2 of them.
Right, sort of to protect us from the onslaught of, I understand.
Well, here's 2 questions. What do you think are the most likely state agencies that we're talking about here? And then second, and I'm sorry, it seems like I'm asking you guys to do the work for us here. What sorts of processes or limiting processes do you have in mind to try to make sure that the proposals we see are not, frivolous or too wide, or what sorts of scenarios have you thought about? How would we do it?
I can tell you some of the soft requests that we've already received. We've received, when I say soft, I mean conversations, not formal requests. But it's already come to us. The idea of the Opioid Abatement Authority becoming a funding source for the purchase of naloxone statewide. We've had an inquiry from Department of Corrections about funding MAT programs statewide in the prisons. And while both of those are certainly eligible types of expenses and there's a definite need, either one of those would exceed the full amount that we have available in this category. And so we have enough money to make a difference, but we don't have enough money to fund all of these statewide efforts. And so I think the idea of limiting it is to think about bang for the buck versus, are there other sources to possibly pay for some of these initiatives? And I think that's some of the balancing act that we're struggling with.
But maybe the trick is to find projects that can self-fund themselves once we get them up and going, and they're in an area that can figure out how to keep going, because like you said, the money's going to run out. It's not indefinite. So the idea is give priority to the ones that like if Wise County gets $500,000, what can we do, and what is the payoff on how many people can we help for that, and create what that program would look like, because Wise County probably doesn't know, right? And just give them that idea, because we've done the back end work. This would work for you. Would you like to try? It's that kind of stuff we want to try to work through to offer solutions with this, so that they don't spend it thinking they're doing good, but it's going to be gone in 2 years.
Yeah, state agencies, most state agencies that would be looking at this, you're looking at behavioral health, social services, Medicaid, criminal justice, corrections, maybe juvenile justice, veterans services, large agencies that have resources to do gap analysis, to look at performance measures and things, and I think one of those kind of limiting factors might be, is like, do we want to, you know, there's programs that are in place, if you expand those programs, you know, what's our, you know, if we give you $1 million, how many people, you know, what's your gap that you're closing, or is there, I'd be looking, personally, if it was me, I'm looking for something where there's a huge gap and there's nothing that a state agency can step in and work with regional partners or whatever. So I think that's some of the kind of guidelines that we can put on it to say, we're looking for you to show through performance measures how you can close gaps for us as a state agency versus just trying to add 2 more people to something that's already going. And how many more, you know, are 2 more people going to serve 500, 5,000, 50,000, you know, that type of thing.
That makes sense.
I think we can push them a lot harder than some localities, as we say, what works for Fairfax has also got to work for Lee County. Fairfax has a lot of resources for performance measures. Lee County is going to have less. And we don't want to get them bogged down. But the state agencies have a lot of data and have a lot of resources. They should, if they know, then they should be able to prove it to us.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think it'd be really interesting to see how we define, but the concept, yeah, absolutely makes sense. I mean,
So I think one option that the committee has is to say, so there's a couple of extremes here that we could land on. On one hand, we could say, look, we're not going to accept any unsolicited proposals from state agencies, period. We're only going to do requests for proposals that the OAA initiates, period. Or we could go all the way to the other end and say, we're going to make it wide open and any state agency can apply for any opioid related abatement project. And so this is one where we really, and we don't have to decide this today, but it is a question that we're going to have to land somewhere on that spectrum to decide how to handle the state agency requests.
Would it be an option for us to perhaps set a different time schedule for the unsolicited proposals? We said, okay, we'll do the initial group beginning January 19th, and maybe unsolicited could come in starting in March or April, so that your staff is not overwhelmed.
Well, yeah, so the state agencies, we don't have a time frame on yet. In part, there's some administrative things such as how, if they apply for the funds, we need to make sure there's a mechanism in place. They have to have appropriation, and make sure, and then they, you know, it's a grant and the grants get approved by the governor's office. But this are state funds. Is that going to qualify? There's a lot of administrative barriers we kind of want to work through so that we open up money for them in a way that they can use it easily. Most state agencies getting grant money at the end of the state fiscal year is not useful for them. They really need it in July, not in June. Whereas when you're getting things to a locality, it just becomes revenue that they can control and manage fiscally and reappropriate and those types of things. Whereas state agencies don't have a lot of that latitude. So, but I think that is a possibility. We could have 2 different timelines between like an RFP timeline and an unsolicited time frame as well. Any other thoughts on that, Tony?
Well, I think this is a good conversation. One of the options that we had discussed, and it's not on the slide here, is that maybe we have a 2-step process when it comes to the state agency funds. And we start with a request for information and we just put it out. It's an RFI and allow state agencies to provide us with what their needs are, what they think they would be able to do. And we cull through that and from that decide what kind of RFPs we want to issue. So we start the process off by allowing state agencies to send us their ideas, their requests. We review that and reduce it down to specific programs that we are interested in pursuing with those agencies and ask them to give us specific pricing in the form of a proposal to move forward. It's a little bit of a hybrid of the options that we've been discussing.
Basically just asking him how we can be a service, tell us what you need, and then we look at that and decide whether that's how we want to spend the money. And okay, And that slows everything down, right? We're not,
It does.
you imagine? Oh, my goodness.
We already
Yeah,
got
I like it. I like that idea
plus
better
regionals.
than all of us.
Plus
being-
the-
Okay,
Because their state agencies work within silos within their own agencies, much less sometimes outside. So we could see similar proposals come in from separate agencies, and it might be, okay, we need to put you two together and hammer out one solution that we can, one of you needs to kind of be the lead to run this and get the funding type of thing. That kind of stuff happens, you know, all the time. As Tony's probably told you, most of these agencies that I listed out have their own substance abuse kind of office, and there's no one kind of statewide that's, you know, ultimately responsible. So that's why we kind of want to be the convener to bring these people together. So it might be that it's a better way for us to kind of look for that highest and best use that we've talked about.
there's 113 of these, right?
State agencies, depending on the day.
I saw 113 somewhere. That's where I came up with that. I know there's more, but I saw 113
Potentially, yeah.
somewhere.
I think VDOT would have a little trouble getting it funded. So I think we could look at easily potentially 20 agencies that would be able to get it and qualify for funds, maybe
I
more.
don't know, without roads, how do you get people to the treatment?
Leave it to the lawyers, right?
Okay.
So I think the question is, where do we want to go with this, the state agency process? Do we feel more comfortable with setting up an RFI process versus a narrowly defined unsolicited proposal process and try to get ahead of it to get information and then use that as our guidelines?
I like the sound of the two-step process a little bit better.
So do I.
It just gives us an opportunity to breathe a little bit.
Right, yeah. I like your suggestion. I'm glad y'all put a lot of thought into this. Present well. Thank you. Yeah, that's better. You know, ask for information, let them do some homework. You know, some of them might not get it to us in a time frame, so they're out.
Right.
You know, and that'll help us. Yeah, that's a good idea.
Okay. So the next item is less a decision point and more kind of what we talked about earlier. As we are able to get things together, we will be sending, you know, draft policies, terms and conditions for you all to review and provide feedback on, hopefully the goal of a vote on January 6th, so we can have everything ready for the 19th. And then, you know, Mr. Spencer, you asked about homework. In addition, here's the real homework, which we can talk some about now, if you'd like, is the brainstorming the kind of potential gray area proposals that could come in that we may decide whether we do want to fund now, don't want to fund that, want to think about funding, or might maybe get funding in part. Tony, do you want to run through any specific examples of that?
Sure. We've already had some of these questions come forward, so we're not being creative here. Would we consider a crisis intervention training for police officers to be fully abatement related? So typically a 40-hour crisis intervention training, CIT training for police officer is a 40-hour class where they learn how to de-escalate people who are in crisis. And, you know, there's a piece of that that's related to addiction, and I don't know the answer, but this is another one of those gray area type questions. If I think we're going to see, I'm predicting we're going to see a number of law enforcement related project requests. And as you guys know, we don't fund law enforcement. We do fund abatement efforts. So anything that is intended to train police officers or law enforcement officers about what substance use disorder is, how to help somebody who's in crisis, how to respond to an overdose, and really maybe efforts to divert people from the criminal justice system. Those are all, in drug court, those are all clearly allowable uses, but we think there's going to be some gray area in there. I've already received one call from a county administrator who his plan was to add more patrol deputies And because they were going to carry naloxone, he wanted to pay for their salaries with their opioid settlement funds. And so the question is, would we do that? And so as we brainstorm individually, because from a practical standpoint, we can't get the group together in this type of public meeting on a regular basis. It just doesn't work with everybody's schedule. What we're asking for from the members of the committee is to brainstorm things that you think we might see and hear so that we can pre-plan so that the authority can pre-plan how it's going to respond to those. And I think that
brainstorming here, I'm almost thinking, if we see a gray area, can we build into our process and procedures a sense that we can almost like table that proposal and counter it back? Because maybe with some feedback, we can fine tune a gray area proposal to make it a more palatable solution for both the locale, the applicant, and the opioid abatement authority.
Yeah, Tim, that's exactly what we're going to be doing. I would also like to see us be able to be proactive and put out guidance on the front end to tell localities, look, these are some things that we're not going to allow, and list some examples. Or we might say, look, if you're doing a training program, then you have to show that the program's got to be at least 50% of the hours of the training program have to be related to substance use disorders and opioids in order for us to for it to be qualified. Now I'm making that up. I'm not the expert here, but I think if we can provide some guidance on the front end, then it cuts down on some of the back and forth later on after a locality has finished its research, submitted its proposal, and then we've contacted them and said, no, you can't do this.
So yeah, I think we be looking for you all to think about what you might see and anything you have heard or might hear. And then we will come also with what we've brainstormed, for the 6th with some potential solutions. And I think if something comes up or you get asked or think about something, feel free to, pop an email out to us, and so we can get it on the list or start thinking about ways of how we might be able to, provide recommendations for responses that we can build in. And so for our last item was just as we are kind of getting a little bit past our time here. Is there any other thoughts, feedbacks, or questions or things that you were thinking about when you volunteered for this committee that you wanted to see in the process that hasn't come to light?
So I have a question, because you talked about homelessness and housing. Okay, and I know we have someone from BCU, and I'm familiar with the Motivate Clinic and with the work that they do. Okay, and the problem that Motivate would be having a place so that the folks that they're helping can stay and someone to kind of be with them, right? Recovery oriented, treatment oriented together to make to give that individual wraparound services that they can get there, and transportation. So if somebody came up with a solution for that scenario using these two things, is that something that we're interested in entertaining? And does that, I know that goes direct to abatement, right? And is that something, because I'm on the streets and I kind of, I'm there. Is that something we want to look at and hear about? I mean, and then try to come up with a plan and then offer it to the ones that are in Wise County, right? Or the areas that don't have the resources that VCU would have, or a county like Enrico has. This has, that you throw some money at it, get that going, and then they're responsible for keeping it going. Okay, and how long can they commit and make a match to keep that program going? Because once the money comes for this program is out, how are you gonna keep it going? Are you just gonna tell the people in the houses we're done? Good luck, see you next time if something comes down the pipe? Or can we put it on the VCU or the Motivate or the county to come together during this, look at it while it's working, figure out how to make it a budget item in that county or whatnot? Does that make sense? You know, so that we can keep it going. I mean, I'm real big on self-funding mechanisms. I've got a nonprofit. I don't do a whole lot of asking. I do help figure out how to keep it going. And that to me is what we should do here is not a lot of money when you think about it. Everyone thinks it is, but it won't last long. So if we're thinking about implementing something, perhaps challenging or not challenging, but you know, get the counties or whoever we're helping to meet us in some of that.
I think so, absolutely.
You know,
If it's-
okay.
It fits right in, it's just finding the details of how to define
Pull it off.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, the reason I asked the question is that on the slides, it referred to evidence-based or evidence-informed practices, and technically that is not an evidence-based practice, right?
Right.
Or treatment practice, so that's why I was asking, and yet I do think that, you know, recovery, housing, and there are some organizations within the state that are looking at regulating or at least registering recovery residences so that there's some oversight. That would be the kind of thing that I would recommend, that there's just some kind of some standards. If we're gonna be looking, if we can look at reducing barriers.
And I know that Tony specifically, when he was within Rico County, set up a local recovery residence procedure. And there is a state recovery residence approval process.
We have our agency has 4 residences that are registered with BAR now and getting ready to have it. So, so that type of organization.
And I think Tony had said that this committee or us would kind of follow through with that. So when we give someone and set something up for somebody for success, we follow that. And so that whoever is in charge of dispersing the money, we're gonna follow, go into the homes and we're gonna go in and watch. Are they getting to their appointments on time? And are the houses okay? I think, didn't you say something like that, Tony? We're gonna be watching everything?
Yeah, I think one of the strongest aspects of the way the code was written is that the Opioid Abatement Authority will have the authority to inspect these projects. And that's exactly what we'll do. We'll go into the field. We might not be able to inspect every project every year, but we're definitely gonna go out there and do a roadshow and see how the money's being spent. And if I can respond real quick to something that Sharon mentioned about evidence-based programs. You know, I think it's fair to say that what the General Assembly was trying to do when they wrote the statute was to avoid allowing a scenario where the money's being gambled away on risky, unproven efforts. And I think providing transportation to somebody to get help is a common sense solution that we can support. I think that the risk on something that is if a city or county comes up with some crazy idea of how they're going to treat people, and it's none of the experts on our board have ever heard of it. There's no evidence behind it. Then it creates a risk and it's a gamble. And that's what the General Assembly, I think, my read of the statute is that we're trying to avoid those types of wild goose chases.
Virginia has been seen as really a leader with our arts program through DMAS. And I'm wondering if this group has the opportunity to look at perhaps creating some other, like the question about crisis intervention training. That's really more geared toward mental health. There is a substance use disorders component. But what if we wanted proposals from our institutions of higher education to do some research to develop some new cutting edge interventions, broad-based. I would love to see us be able to come up with new solutions that are effective, at least with a small part of this.
Well, that's where we're trying to preserve the discretionary funds that this board has it's one thing to ask for an organization to come up with something. It's another thing to ask an organization to come up with something and offer to pay them to do it. And so to the extent that this committee and this board can approach those institutions of higher learning or state agencies and say, look, we'd like to enter into a contract with you where you propose an educational program to improve people's awareness about opioid use disorder and to create a delivery ready educational program that can be taught to law enforcement officers. And I'm making this up, but that's the type of flexibility that I think the board needs to be able to retain in order to not just act as a distributor of money, but really tackle these problems, especially where there's gaps that are not being filled. Madam Chair, I just for the as a point of order, we do have on the agenda a public comment period. I know we've run over our allotted time already, but as we're looking at the agenda, I did want to just mention that if there's people I don't think we have any general public online. I don't see anyone in the participant list, but if there's individuals in the audience who want to speak, that we need to just keep that in mind as part of the agenda.
Sounds good. Do you want to go ahead and do that now, or do you think we've kind of completed our discussion of the points that we wanted to go through?
Certainly, if there's any other members of the committee that have any questions or comments, I'm not in a hurry. I can stay and listen, and I'm not sure how everybody else's schedule looks. But if there's not any other comments, then we could ask if there's anybody from the public that would like to make comments as well.
Does anybody else have any comments that they wanted to share before we move on? Well, Tony, I think we were all pretty much in consensus with the ideas, with the idea that we will do the two-step process instead of the narrow definition. So I think we can move on and see if there's any public comment.
So I'm Joel Morgan. I'm Executive Director of Recovery Corps in Virginia. Since 2017, we've been providing AmeriCorps members who are trained to be peer navigators and project coordinators to organizations from Minnesota, Illinois, now in Virginia, to support organizations like the Journey House Foundation and 11 other organizations in Virginia. And we're looking to expand that. And we use very much a research-based and backed program to look at how we're helping people who are already in recovery, helping people in recovery. So the people who are our members are increasing their recovery length of time, as well as helping new participants. And so I was really heartened by the conversation today that you're having, and I just want to lift that up, that it's great. I always say though that I wish we weren't here having this conversation. I wish there weren't these issues that we're combating as a community, but we are. And I think part of what Recovery Corps, we'd love to be, as you're looking at things, we'd love to be part of a matchmaking process. We'd love to talk about what we can do, what we can provide, and how we can be of service to localities that may not have something that they can do right away, ready-made. We can come in and really help with that and use people from their region. That's the other cool thing, is we want to use people from their region to do these programs as well. And we'd love to be fully across the state over the next 4 or 5 years. And so that's my comment. Thank you for all the work that you're putting in, especially for the members of the authority and the committee. Thank you for what you're doing. And we're behind the work that you're doing, and we can't wait to see the good that comes from where this money gets distributed. Thank you. Thanks. And I'll let y'all know, they have a strenuous interviewing process. They don't just, they're first class in how they do the work, okay, and how they hire people. They let the localities try to find them. Okay, not every addict is employable. Okay, and you know that, and you get some of these folks, and I think we have 5 or 6. And golly, man, they're shining stars. I can't wait to watch them, because this is only the beginning of their career path. And they lost everything, right? And so they just want to help people. And now they have a way to make a living, take care. I got single moms taking care of their kids and helping people during the day. that are now gonna be eligible after this program with them and through us and all these other places, get career path jobs, come and work in a place like this. You know, to help folks, you know, get state jobs because they've done the work, and it's really, and that's how this money is helping folks can pay it forward, and that's how I think we can grow this and be, you know, decades to come results. I'm very excited too. I mean, I'm glad you guys are like drilling down on it. I like the idea of the oversight, just not giving someone money. I like the idea of being, you know, and if they're going sideways with it, us trying to, you know, come around them and try to reset or realign them, you know, that's huge. You don't get that anywhere else. And I think it'll be advantageous to anyone that's able to participate in what we're offering them. Anybody else?
I think that covers it for here in the room for public comment.
Well, I just want to, again, thank everyone for your time. Feel like it was a really productive meeting, a good conversation. We will, to Tim's request, we'll definitely get this presentation out to everyone along with the draft minutes. And any other materials that we presented will all be included in the packet that goes out to you. Please don't hesitate to contact me, contact Charlie, Adam, any of us. We're spending a lot of time noodling on these things, and we appreciate your feedback. And so, Madam Chair, that's all I have. I turn it back over to you for see if there's a motion to adjourn.
Yes, that's what I was just going to ask. Do I have a motion for adjournment, please?
So moved.
Thank you much. Do I have a second?
I'll second, just say my name's in there somewhere.
Thank you. I think we're all in favor unless I hear otherwise. So we will go ahead and adjourn this meeting. And I thank everyone for your participation and attendance. And we're going to do some great work. Really excited about what we've been able to accomplish.